The airport was busy, full of noise and people rushing from gate to gate, but Lena was calm. She wore a simple blue blouse and black pants. Her hair was tied back. No jewelry, no loud colors, just quiet confidence. As she stepped into the plane, she smiled softly at the flight attendant and showed her boarding pass. "Welcome, ma'am," the attendant said, surprised. Her voice lowered. "Oh, 3A, right this way." Lena nodded and walked toward the front of the aircraft, the VIP section. She sat down in seat 3A, window side, first row. She placed her small leather bag on her lap and looked outside the window, waiting for takeoff. Other passengers slowly entered. Some were in suits, some in designer clothes. People chatted, checked phones, and placed bags in the overhead compartments. Then came Mr. Dalton. He walked in wearing a sharp black suit, sunglasses still on, even inside the plane. He held a silver briefcase and a loud attitude. He looked around like he owned the sky. As he passed through the business class and entered VIP, he suddenly stopped. His face tightened. Lena was sitting there, quiet, calm, and clearly not dressed like the others. He raised his eyebrows and scoffed. He looked at the flight attendant and pointed. "Excuse me, what is she doing in this seat?" he asked loudly. The attendant froze. "Sir, she's—" "There must be a mistake," he interrupted. "That's my seat, or someone else's, but she doesn't belong here." Lena didn't even turn her head. She remained still, her fingers gently resting on the armrest. Passengers nearby started to look. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. Mr. Dalton stepped forward and faced Lena. "I said, you're in the wrong section," he repeated. "Coach is back there. Maybe take a left, miss." Finally, Lena looked at him. Her eyes were calm, not angry, just knowing. "I'm in the right seat," she said, simply. Mr. Dalton chuckled. "I don't think so." The flight attendant stepped in. "Sir," she showed her boarding pass. "It says 3A. "That can't be right," he said louder now. "This is VIP. She's—" He paused, trying to find the right insult. Lena turned her head back to the window, ignoring him completely. Mr. Dalton frowned, then looked around at the other passengers, expecting support. But no one spoke. Something about her presence made people unsure. She wasn't loud. She wasn't rich-looking. But she wasn't afraid. She belonged. And that silence made Mr. Dalton even angrier. "I want to speak to the pilot," he demanded. "This is not how VIP should look." The flight attendant tried to calm him. "Sir, please sit down. The flight is about to take off." Lena slowly reached into her bag. Everyone watched. Mr. Dalton stepped back slightly. She pulled out a sleek black notebook and a government-issued badge. It had her name, Lena Harrow. Underneath it, small but clear, Federal Aviation Oversight, Special Auditor. The crew's eyes widened. The whispers stopped. Silence fell. Lena spoke, soft and firm. "I was assigned this seat by the Aviation Board. I'm here to observe behavior and service on this flight. Please return to your own seat." Mr. Dalton's mouth opened, then closed. He looked completely lost. The same woman he had tried to push out was here to audit the flight, and every word he had said was being noted. 2 days earlier, flashback, in a quiet office in Washington, D.C., Lena sat across from a tall man in a gray suit. He slid a folder toward her. "This airline has received complaints," he said. "Class discrimination, staff behavior, unfair treatment of passengers." Lena opened the file and scanned the names. "We want the truth," he said. "No warnings, no red carpets. We want you to see it as it really is." Lena nodded. "Send me as a regular passenger." He smiled. "Better. Send you as someone they'll underestimate." Back to present. Mr. Dalton finally backed away, his face red. "I didn't know." "You didn't care," Lena replied, her voice low but steady. The flight attendant gently guided Mr. Dalton to his actual seat, 3C, just across the aisle from Lena. For the rest of the flight, he said nothing. Lena opened her notebook and began writing. First line, Passenger 3C, disrespectful, attempted to remove me based on appearance, observed by surrounding crew and passengers. She looked out the window again. The clouds were peaceful. But the truth, it had already started flying. The plane was still rising through the clouds, but tension in the VIP section had already reached its peak. Mr. Dalton sat stiffly in 3C, just across the aisle from Lena. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted between his phone screen and the window, but he couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. How had he been silenced like that? Who was this woman? Lena, on the other hand, was completely calm. She sipped a glass of water quietly and took notes in her small black notebook. Every once in a while, her pen stopped, then moved again. No emotions, just observation. She wasn't writing to punish anyone. She was writing to protect future passengers. But Mr. Dalton didn't see it that way. To him, this was personal. He leaned toward the flight attendant, who was now carefully avoiding his gaze. "Excuse me," he said coldly. "I'd like to file a formal complaint." The attendant hesitated. "About what, sir?" Dalton gestured toward Lena. "About her behavior. She made me feel threatened and humiliated. I want her moved." The attendant blinked. "Sir, she's a government auditor." "I don't care what she is," Dalton snapped. "She had an attitude. She embarrassed me. You saw it. She should not be allowed in this section." Lena didn't look up, but her pen began to move again. Passenger 3C attempted false report against authorized government official. Escalation noted. The attendant gave a small nervous smile. "I'm sorry, sir. There's nothing we can do." But Mr. Dalton wasn't finished. He took out his phone and opened a message app. He started typing rapidly. Flight 762. Lady in 3A claiming she's some kind of inspector. Looks suspicious. Please escalate. He pressed send. The message went straight to a private contact, a friend who worked for a major media outlet. Dalton wasn't just a businessman. He had connections, and he knew how to use them. Within minutes, he got a reply. "Interesting. Can we confirm her ID? Get a photo." Dalton smirked. He turned slightly and snapped a secret photo of Lena as she looked out the window. But what he didn't know was, the flight had live surveillance. Every VIP section had hidden cameras, and Lena had been briefed on them before the flight. At that exact moment, in a quiet room back at the airline's security monitoring office, a supervisor leaned forward and pointed at the screen. "Zoom in on 3C. Did he just take a photo?" Another officer checked. "Yes, sir. Unauthorized photography of a federal inspector." A third officer picked up a phone and called the cockpit. Inside the cockpit, the pilot's headset beeped. "Captain, this is Central Control. Please be aware. A male passenger in seat 3C just attempted to photograph a government inspector. Subject is Lena Harrow. This action is now being logged. Do not engage unless requested." The pilot looked over at his co-pilot. "This is bigger than we thought." Back in the cabin, Lena gently closed her notebook and turned her head toward Mr. Dalton. He quickly put his phone away, pretending he was checking emails. "Mr. Dalton," she said, her voice polite but firm. He looked up, acting innocent. "Yes. I noticed you filed a complaint," she said. Dalton forced a smile. "Yes. I believe in fair reporting." "Of course," she said. "That's why I'm here." Then she paused. "I also noticed you took a photo of me. That's not allowed, especially on a government-monitored flight." Dalton's smile faded. "You have no proof of that." Lena gently pointed to the small round black lens hidden in the panel above his head. "Actually, we do." Dalton looked up and finally saw the camera. His face dropped. Lena leaned in just slightly and spoke softly, so only he could hear. You tried to humiliate someone you didn't know. Then you lied. And now you've crossed into interference with a federal operation. Dalton swallowed hard. The same woman he thought didn't belong now had complete control of the situation, and he couldn't take it back. Somewhere at airline headquarters, an email popped up on the desk of the Director of Passenger Affairs. Subject: Flight 762. Incident with VIP passenger and federal auditor. Attached: photo of Mr. Dalton, a copy of his complaint, and the video footage of his attempt to secretly take a photo. The director sighed and shook his head. "This guy again," he muttered. "When will he learn?" He picked up the phone. "Schedule a disciplinary review for Mr. Dalton. Immediately." Back on the plane. The lights dimmed. Meal service began. Passengers relaxed. But one man sat frozen. Dalton didn't eat, didn't drink. He just sat there, thinking about how fast his power had vanished. And beside him, the woman in 3A continued her work, steady, silent, and completely in control. The plane cruised smoothly at 35,000 feet, but the atmosphere in the VIP section was anything but calm. Lena sat in seat 3A, her demeanor composed, her pen moving steadily across the pages of her notebook. Each stroke captured observations: the crew's professionalism, the passengers' behavior, the overall service quality. Across the aisle, Mr. Dalton fidgeted in his seat, casting occasional glances at Lena. His earlier attempts to assert dominance had backfired spectacularly, leaving him unsettled. Unbeknownst to him, Lena's notes were more than mere observations. They were part of a comprehensive audit report destined for the airline's top executives. In the cockpit, the pilot received a discreet message from the airline's headquarters. "Ensure all protocols are followed meticulously. Auditor on board." The pilot acknowledged the directive, understanding the gravity of the situation. Back in the VIP section, the flight attendants maintained their professionalism, attending to passengers with attentive care. Lena noted their efficiency and courtesy, marking positive points in her report. Mr. Dalton, however, remained restless. He attempted to engage the attendants in conversation, seeking validation, but their responses were polite and non-committal. As the flight progressed, Lena's report took shape, highlighting both commendable practices and areas needing improvement. Her observations were thorough, her assessments fair. Upon landing, Lena disembarked quietly, her presence leaving a lasting impression on those who had witnessed the events unfold. At the airline's headquarters, her report was received with immediate attention. The findings prompted a series of internal reviews and policy discussions, aiming to enhance service quality and address the issues identified. Mr. Dalton's behavior, documented meticulously in the report, led to further scrutiny. The airline recognized the importance of treating all passengers with respect, regardless of appearances. Lena's quiet diligence had sparked a transformation within the airline, emphasizing the value of humility, professionalism, and accountability. As the plane touched down and rolled slowly to the gate, Lena didn't rush. She calmly closed her notebook, placed her pen inside, and waited for the seatbelt sign to turn off. She looked outside the window. Gray skies, city lights, and a crowd waiting inside the airport terminal. But what nobody knew was that this flight had just changed something big. And the person responsible: a quiet woman in seat 3A. As Lena stepped off the plane and entered the terminal, something flashed in her memory. A moment from 3 weeks earlier, deep inside a secure government office. 3 weeks ago, Lena stood inside a clean, quiet room with glass walls. She wore a simple suit, hair tied back, no makeup. Across from her stood Mr. Banner, the head of aviation oversight. He slid a thin black file across the table. Flight 762, VIP section. We've had complaints. Lena opened the file. Inside were printed photos, passenger records, and behavior reports. One name was underlined: Henry Dalton. Banner continued: "He's caused problems before. Staff are scared to speak. One even resigned. Lena looked up. Why not ban him? Banner sighed. He's protected. Donations. Friends and media. We need proof. Real proof. The kind that ends careers and fixes systems. She nodded slowly. You want me to fly with him? Banner nodded. Exactly. But not as an inspector. You'll be undercover. A normal passenger. You'll wear anything but authority. We want to see how they treat you when they don't know who you are. Lena closed the file and stood. I'll take the window seat. Present day, airline headquarters. Back at the airline's corporate building, the report from Lena had reached the hands of the Senior Director of Operations, Mrs. Jinglestone. She read it silently, her lips pressed into a line. She had been in the business for 25 years, seen everything, good and bad. But this report, it was different. Lena had written clearly, simply, without drama. But inside the report were damning facts. False complaint by passenger 3C. Unauthorized photo of a federal agent. Previous history of complaints linked to same passenger. Flight staff scared to act due to fear of consequences. Each point was followed by video evidence, witness quotes, and timestamps. Mrs. Stone turned to her assistant. Pull his file. A few moments later, a thick folder was dropped onto her desk. Inside were 10 complaints from past flights, 3 filed by crew members. One stood out, a younger flight attendant who had written, passenger in 3C shouted at a mother with a baby, threatened to have her removed. No support from supervisor. I felt helpless. That complaint had gone nowhere. But not anymore. Mrs. Stone picked up the phone. I want a meeting with the CEO. Now. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment, Lena sat at her small kitchen table, her laptop open, sipping tea. She didn't look like someone who had just shaken a powerful company. Her inbox pinged. A message from Mr. Banner. Subject: you did exactly what was needed. Message: the airline has scheduled emergency review sessions. They want your permission to use parts of your report as training material for all VIP crew. Let me know. Lena smiled faintly. She wrote back. Approved. Keep passenger names out. It's not about one man. It's about fixing the culture. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. Her mission had been personal too. Flashback. 12 years ago. Lena was 19. Her mother, a cleaner in the same airline, had once been pushed by a rich passenger who didn't want people like her touching his seat. Nobody had defended her. The manager had apologized to the man and blamed Lena's mother for being too visible. That night, Lena had made a promise. I'll never let them silence women like her again. And now here she was, 12 years later, quietly fighting from the inside. Back at the airline. A ripple effect. The next day, posters were printed. Respect is and Optivio. Hail. VIP or note. Evirui PASSNGR MEATTRs. Mandatory staff meetings were scheduled. Mr. Dalton was notified of a formal investigation. And Lena. She was already planning her next assignment. Not for fame, not for power, but for justice. The sun rose gently across the city skyline, but at the airline's headquarters, there was no peace. Inside a sleek glass building, the CEO's office phone rang. Sharp, loud, and unexpected. Mr. Wilford Gray, the CEO, glanced at the caller ID and immediately straightened his tie. It was not a call he could ignore. The screen simply said, Federal to or to OFFIC. Direct Tor's line. He took a breath and answered. Wilford Gray. The voice on the other end was clear and firm. Mr. Gray, this is Director Ames. I trust you've read the audit report from Flight 762. Yes, sir, Wilford said quickly. We're already taking steps. I hope so, the director said, cutting him off. Because that flight. It's now a case file. We've opened an official investigation. and you'll cooperate fully." Wilford's voice went dry. "Yes, of course. And one more thing," the director added. "We know this wasn't an isolated event. Ms. Harrow's report came with 10 passenger testimonies, 3 flight crew interviews, and video footage. You have a culture problem, not a one-time mistake." Wilford swallowed hard. "Understood." The call ended. He stood alone in his office, staring out the tall window. For years, they had focused only on luxury, on profit, on appearances. But now, everything had changed. And the woman who changed it. She wasn't rich. She wasn't loud. She was smart, patient, and watching. Meanwhile, across town, Lena was walking down a quiet street with a coffee in hand. She wasn't dressed like a VIP. She didn't need to be. She passed a newspaper stand and paused. The front page read, "Flight 762 under investigation. Unseen ODI2 or XPOZs SOISTNICABUS." Her photo wasn't there. There were no interviews. But her work was everywhere. A small boy beside the stand pointed at the paper. "Mom, look. That's the flight we were almost on." Lena smiled quietly and kept walking. Back inside the airline, the head of human resources, Denise Ford, called for an emergency team meeting. "Everyone, listen up. We've been given 14 days to respond to the investigation. We need to collect every incident report, every staff comment, and every security tape from the past 6 months." Someone raised their hand. "What about Dalton?" Denise looked tired. "He's been temporarily suspended from all loyalty perks. We can't ban him yet, but he's under review." Another staff member asked quietly, "Do we know who the woman was?" Denise paused. "She's not just a passenger. She's a federal-level aviation auditor, placed in secret to watch how we treat people. And we failed." The room went silent. Denise took a deep breath. "We're lucky she didn't go to the press. She gave us a chance to fix this from the inside." Dalton fights back. But not everyone stayed quiet. Across the city, Henry Dalton was furious. He sat in his leather chair, watching news reports with growing anger. "They're making me the villain," he shouted to his assistant. "That woman, she set me up. I demand a retraction." His assistant looked nervous. "Sir, there's footage of you taking her photo without permission and shouting at her. It doesn't look good." Dalton's face turned red. "I'm a premium platinum member. I pay for respect." "But you don't earn it," the assistant said under her breath. Dalton didn't hear her. He stormed out of his office, ready to fight back with lawyers and threats. But this time, the world wasn't so willing to listen. Lena's next step. That night, Lena sat at a small table with a tablet in front of her. She was reviewing the next list of flights for inspection. But her phone buzzed. A message from Director Ames. "We've received full cooperation. You've changed the airline's direction. Well done. Would you consider training new field agents?" Lena smiled. She typed back, "Yes. I'd love to teach them how to listen before they speak. Especially in seat 3A. Training day. A room full of hope." A week later, Lena stood in front of a classroom of quiet, curious faces. Men and women of all ages wearing simple clothes, with sharp minds and calm eyes. She held up a printed ticket. "Who here knows what this is?" Someone answered, "A boarding pass." Lena nodded. "Wrong," she said softly. "It's not a piece of paper. It's a promise. A promise that says, you belong on this flight. You deserve safety. You deserve respect." She paused. But what happens when that promise is broken? Silence. Lena walked to the whiteboard and wrote one word. Truth. That's why we do this. Not to punish, not to control, but to remind powerful people that no one is above decency. Henry Dalton was used to being treated like a king. Everywhere he went, restaurants, hotels, airports, people opened doors for him, smiled too wide, and said yes, sir, before he even asked a question. But now, nobody was smiling anymore. He sat in a quiet, expensive office, surrounded by silence. His phone had stopped ringing. His name, once connected to power, was now tied to scandal. His travel perks had been frozen. Business partners were distancing themselves. One even returned a check. Henry gritted his teeth. "All because of that woman in seat 3A, he muttered. But what he didn't understand was this. It wasn't just about one woman. It was about every person he'd ever disrespected. A meeting that changed the tone. At the airline's main office, a large conference room was filled with executives, crew managers, and legal advisors. On the projector screen was Lena's report again, broken down section by section. The CEO, Mr. Wilford Gray, stood at the front. His voice was calm, but serious. "We built this company for the future," he began. "But somehow, we forgot the most basic thing: human respect." No one spoke. He clicked the remote. A short video played. A clip from the flight, showing Dalton snapping a photo of Lena, followed by crew members whispering nervously instead of stepping in. When the video ended, Mr. Gray looked at the room. "Is this who we are?" he asked. "No," a young crew trainer answered softly. "Then it's time we prove it," Mr. Gray said. "We've let VIP become a wall instead of a bridge. That ends now. A new policy is born." The airline moved quickly. Within 48 hours, they launched a new internal campaign. VIP equals value in people. The message was clear. Being rich didn't make someone more important. Every person on board deserved respect, from the first row to the last seat in economy. Posters went up. Training videos were recorded. But most importantly, Lena's story was shared, not with her name, but with her mission. Crew members watched her calm behavior, her quiet courage, and the way she stood her ground without raising her voice. One new flight attendant whispered to her trainer, "I want to be like her." And that's when things truly started to change. Lena's mother watches silently. Back at home, in a quiet part of town, Lena's mother sat in front of the television. She was older now. Her hands weren't as strong as they once were. But her eyes, they were proud. A news segment played, showing the airline's response to the investigation. One line stood out. The changes came after a mystery passenger stood her ground and forced the company to face its past. Lena's mother didn't need to ask who the mystery passenger was. She knew. Her daughter had done what nobody else could. She had turned pain into progress. Dalton faces the mirror. 1 week later, Henry Dalton was called into a private meeting with the airline's legal team. He thought it was about saving his membership, but instead, he was handed a document. Final warning: passenger behavior policy violation. Dalton blinked. "You're serious?" The legal advisor nodded. "We've reviewed 10 past complaints. This is your last chance. If it happens again, you're banned for life." Dalton stood, angry. "I made this airline money. I filled your VIP lounges. And now you're treating me like a criminal." The advisor replied calmly, "No, Mr. Dalton. We're treating you like everyone else. That's the point." Lena returns, but not alone. 3 weeks after the flight, Lena returned to the airport, not as a secret auditor this time, but as a guest speaker. She stood beside a nervous young trainee who was about to take her first official flight as lead crew. Lena leaned in and smiled. "Just remember," she said softly, "power doesn't sit in seat 1A. It walks the aisle quietly, listens carefully, and speaks only when it must." The young woman nodded, her eyes wide with hope. Lena stepped back and watched the boarding process. A businessman in a suit walked past her and barely noticed her. She smiled. That was fine. She wasn't there to be noticed. She was there to make sure others were. Inside a classroom, her story is told. In an aviation training school miles away, an instructor told the story of the woman in 3A. New recruits sat in silence as the tale unfolded, about a flight, a conflict, and a quiet woman who held more authority than anyone guessed. The instructor finished with a simple message. She didn't wear a badge. She didn't flash power. But she changed a system because she knew her worth. Let that be your strength too. Weeks had passed since the flight that shook the airline. People had moved on with their lives, but the seat, 3A, had not been forgotten. In fact, it had become something more. Some crew members called it the respect seat. Others called it the reminder. But for everyone working at the airline now, seat 3A told a story. A story of what happens when someone chooses silence, strength, and truth, all at once. And it all started with Lena. A new flight, a new crew. It was a bright Monday morning. A new flight was ready to take off. The aircraft was full. Business travelers, families, students, and elderly passengers all boarded one by one. As always, the crew smiled and guided them. But something was different today. The lead flight attendant paused at seat 3A. She took a deep breath and placed a small laminated card on the tray table. It read, "This seat once held a woman who spoke no words, but her silence changed everything. May we treat every seat like 3A." Passengers saw it and asked about it. And each time, a quiet, respectful version of the story was told. She wasn't just a passenger, one crew member would say. She was a message. Lena's last report. In a quiet room far from the airport, Lena sat at her desk. Her last audit was finished. Her work year was complete. The final report had already been submitted, along with crew improvements, public reactions, and follow-up steps. The airline had passed, barely, but more importantly, it had grown. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she typed the final words. Some seats are just seats, but others hold history. When people are judged by looks, status, or background, fairness dies. Seat 3A reminded the world, dignity travels with you, even in silence. She pressed send and closed the file forever. Dalton's final flight. Henry Dalton sat in a regular seat now, economy. He was no longer allowed in the VIP lounge. No more champagne. No more priority boarding. At first, he raged. He blamed everyone. But after weeks of silence, of being treated like everyone else, something strange started to happen. He noticed the flight crew. He saw how hard they worked, how tired they looked, how they smiled even when passengers were rude. For the first time, Dalton didn't see himself as the most important person on the plane. And it humbled him. On one flight, he even said, "Thank you," to a crew member. She smiled, surprised. Was Dalton changing? Maybe not completely. But 3A had left a mark, even on him. A young girl's dream is born. Back at the airport, a little girl stood with her mother, waiting to board. Her eyes were wide, staring at the airplane outside the window. "Mom," she whispered, "one day I want to sit in 3A." Her mother laughed. "Why? You like windows?" "No," the girl said, "because that's where the brave lady sat, the one who helped everyone." Her mother smiled and knelt down. "You don't need seat 3A to be brave," she said. "You just need to know who you are." A company rebuild. 6 months after the audit, the airline had changed more than just rules. They had added new diversity training. They had created a passenger respect team. And most importantly, they invited former passengers to help design better systems. One of the top suggestions: train your staff to look at passengers like people, not problems. It became their new slogan. And it worked. Complaints dropped. Smiles increased. The airline's reputation, once shaky, became stronger than ever. All because of one flight. All because of one woman. All because of seat 3A. Lena's quiet goodbye. Lena never asked for attention. She never stood on stages or gave interviews. But one afternoon, she walked past a departure gate and overheard a crew briefing. The manager said, "Remember, Everyone gets treated like 3A today. Lena smiled. That was enough for her. She turned, walked away, and faded into the crowd, just as quietly as she had arrived. The final message. 1 year later, a small plaque was added to the inside wall of the aircraft she once flew on. It was simple. No names, no fame, just words. May every flight carry fairness. May every seat carry respect. And may we never forget the quiet woman in 3A.